Hi, welcome to the Renu podcast, brought to you by Simple Online Pharmacy, your weight loss powered by science. As we've mentioned in this podcast, we are really looking to discover the knowledge, motivation, and encouragement to make sustainable and healthy lifestyle changes. And really delighted to have Sarah join us again. Welcome back, Sarah, from All About Obesity.
Great to be here.
And yeah, great to have you as always. And also delighted to welcome Samantha Wallace. And Sam is our in-house specialist in cognitive behavioural therapy and has helped us with a lot of the material and ongoing support of our patients to help them with mindset and mood when they're on a weight care journey. So yeah, Sam, it'd be lovely if you could just give us a little bit more background about your specialism and where your, I guess, clinical expertise comes into play when it comes to weight care.
Yeah, of course. Great to be here. So I am, as you say, a CBT therapist, so cognitive behavioural therapy. I work with clients one-on-one, and I also do group work to provide education and get individuals together to collaborate and talk about their own journey, their own experience, and what their own learning is. So with CBT, I'm mainly supporting people to understand how their thoughts can impact their emotions and how both can impact their behaviour. And all three of these are interlinked with each other. So through the course of CBT, the main aim is always to help people to be able to understand themselves more and recognise what is the goals that they want to achieve, what's the information that they have already, and what is that gap between what we know and how and where we want to get to. And within the work that I do with clients, a lot of it is being able to bridge that gap, really getting to know the individual that I'm working with, what is their own, or what are their own barriers to reaching the goals, what are their own struggles, barriers, and unhelpful versus helpful ways of thinking. That's particularly relevant to any kind of change, or specifically a weight care journey. I think if we can recognise our own mood, our own mindset and behaviours that we use to cope with difficult situations, then we can have a look at that and get curious, not judgmental, but curious about meeting ourselves where we are, and then how can we make the changes to effectively live in a way that we want to and be who we want to be. So clinically, I work with anxiety, depression, self-esteem, addiction, habit and behavioural change, body acceptance, eating behaviours. So there's a wide range of presentations, but a lot of the time it's about meeting that individual person and really tailoring a plan. I think CBT can be so useful because I can do it alongside somebody, but it also provides people with tools that they can use. And it's exciting with the Renu app. We're putting that all onto the app so people can then see the CBT model and take it away and apply it to their own life to be able to make that effective changes and help them on their own weight care journey.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Sam. What an amazing skill set to have. And it must feel so good to be able to help people make those improvements in how they're thinking about things and in their lives. So you kind of talked a little bit into there the importance of mindset and moods in any kind of change in lifestyle. But if we drill particularly into the weight care journey, do you notice that there are any more common mental or psychological barriers to weight loss that people encounter?
Yeah, definitely. There's a plethora of barriers that can be present for anybody that's wanting to make any type of change. I think one of the main ones that I definitely see with working with clients is an expectation that change shouldn't feel so difficult or that it should be easier. I think it's really important to acknowledge when that's there and being able to recognize we could be being unfair to ourselves. And then with our mindset in particular, with a weight care journey, we can have unhelpful ways of thinking. So an example of this would be all or nothing or black and white thinking. So say you deviate from the path that you're on and engage with a behaviour that you didn't want to. So then that could you then say, I've acted in this way, so now I'm going to go off path and I'll start again on Monday. Whereas if we can find a grey area that can help us to acknowledge, okay, maybe I didn't handle that how I wanted to, but I can still stay on this path and I can still make positive lifestyle choices. And take out the judgment or the rigidness of it having to be perfect. Otherwise, it's a failure. We're human, we're complex. It's difficult to be perfect, and we're good enough as we are, even with those moments. Another unhelpful thinking pattern that comes up a lot is labeling. So that's where there's a specific word that's used. So say stupid, idiot, any kind of negative word like that we can attach to ourselves. So if we can identify when these words are coming up, we can apply a bit of compassion to ourselves and ask, would I talk to a friend like that? Is it fair to use that label on myself? And what would be another way of looking at the situation? So, I'm not weak. This is just a really difficult moment. Another one is mental filtering. So the way that our brain works, we'll often filter out the evidence that we see in front of us, and we'll have a confirmation bias of if we've got a negative belief. I'm not good enough, I can't do this, I'm a failure. We'll then absorb all that evidence around us that could support that. So what the changes we can make with our mindset is to recognise if we are engaging with that way of thinking, again, is that fair? What would be an alternative way of looking at that? And how can we start to build up on these more positive beliefs of I am enough? What is the evidence that I can do this? What have I achieved in the past? So there's lots of unhelpful thinking patterns. There'll be content on Renu where people can read more about this and have a think about what they can relate to. But another few barriers that are definitely really common is stress. The world we live in, it's complex. We're humans, we've got different emotions, we've got family, we've got work. There's a lot going on around us and our stress levels are increasing. So we can recognise I am under a lot of stress right now. And that can have an impact on the way that I feel, the way that I think, and the way that I behave. A couple of others, there's difficulties with boundaries. A lot of us can find it really challenging to set boundaries with other people, especially with family and friends or the workplace. And this can really get in the way or hinder our goals. Our needs are often at the bottom. Other people's needs are up here. So being able to recognise what are our needs and how am I able to recognise, one, what are my boundaries? A lot of people aren't even aware of what they would look or sound like. And how can I set boundaries with the people around me? It can feel stressful, but it can hinder us being able to stay on that path and reach the goals that we want to, because we can often put other people's needs above our own needs. So we can learn ways to tune into what our boundaries are and communicate that with other people by acknowledging what behaviours or what narrative is okay and isn't okay and expressing that with other people. And then it can also give us the freedom to be able to say yes when we want to and when that serves us, but also learning to say no, which can be incredibly difficult for a lot of people and can really steer us away from being who we want to be, because we feel too uncomfortable to be able to say no, especially if someone's done something nice for us. A really quick tip around that would be, this is what is okay, this is what is not okay, and if you do that, then this is what my action will be. And then just another one is there's so much information out there that's available for people, and it can be really conflicting. There's a lot of narrative about it being our fault if we're not getting to where we need to be or we don't know what we need to know. So it's important to recognise and be able to access the right type of information that allows us to make consistent, healthy choices that mean that we can make changes to our weight, but also our habits that are healthy for both our mental and physical health. There's so much out there, and I think we hopefully will be able to help people to overcome that barrier by recognising what information is most helpful and appropriate for you and how can you use that for your own journey.
Wow, I feel like I'm in a therapy session just now. That was really great to listen to, and a lot resonates with me as well. Quite a lot to unpack and can talk into there. I think the first thing that you talked about was just the acknowledgement that this isn't easy and that it is quite hard, and that it's not an overnight thing and it's not a quick fix thing. We need to be kind to ourselves a little bit about, habits take time to build and build in, I guess, a more gradual compounding way as opposed to just overnight. And then the other thing you talked about earlier on was around, I slip up, something goes wrong, and that black and whiteness of, well, that's the whole thing gone. Now I'm just going to go back to all my old habits and I'll start again on Monday. I've certainly been guilty of that myself in the past. In fact, actually, when I was on my weight care journey after the birth of my son, we had a little group of us, and one of my friends, I always remember this message she put on our little group. She said, "Guys, I've had a snack accident. I started eating a Terry's chocolate orange and I've just finished it." And I think what we were able to do for each other was really rally around her and say, like, "You can get back on this. The game's not up. Just reset." But yeah, it'd be great to actually, Sarah, is there anything, that resonates there for you? Where can you think of anything?
Not specifically that bit, but the bit that was resonating with me was the whole, I always feel like I'm not enough, like on my own. So I always feel like I overcompensate and kind of try to go above and beyond and do extra things because I feel like I'm having to prove my worth because I'm not enough as me. And so I definitely resonated with that. And boundaries is something I'm really, really bad at because I kind of because I'm trying to overcompensate, I kind of let people take a lot from me because I feel like, well, yeah, let me give this because I feel like I need to, because I need them to like me or love me or whatever it is. It's kind of so I do feel like there's a lot of that going on because I just feel like Sarah as me just isn't enough. So I've got to kind of overcompensate. And also the whole putting yourself first, I'm really rubbish at that. I literally put everybody in the world in front of myself. And so I'm conscious of that as well. I know that I do it, but I find it really hard to then put myself first because because I suppose have quite low self-esteem, I hold my hands up and admit that. I then find it really hard to then put myself first. And I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that's quite a common thing because that's definitely what I do a lot of, especially around if I think about food, for instance, I've got a 4-year-old daughter, which I know we've talked about before, but it's I find I will always make sure Emily gets a really nutritiously great meal because I really want her to get all of that in. But then when it comes to me, I might just eat a piece of toast or something. And I'm kind of where's the thinking there? I want her to have great nutrition, but I'm not thinking that for myself.
I think, yeah, especially when you're a parent and you've got a very busy life and you're looking after someone else, you're always putting them first. And it's really easy to devalue yourself in that equation. And Sarah, I just wanted to say how awesome it is for you to speak so openly and freely about how you feel. I think it would be incredibly empowering and, reassuring for our listeners to hear you speak openly like that. Mm-hmm. Because, I'm no expert here, and Sam, you can help us out with this, but, the first step in all of this is I would guess, is just actually acknowledging how we're feeling mm-hmm. about things and having that awareness. And once we understand that about ourselves, we can start to move forward with strategies that work for us. And I also did want to say, for the record, Sarah, you bring enormous value in what you do. And I think you should value yourself so much more highly than you do. And I'd like to put that message out to everybody as well, that, if you are having those low moments or those moments where you feel you're not enough, I'm sure there are many people in your lives that will have a very different opinion to you. So yeah, I think, maybe talking into that particular point that Sarah raised there about, how you value yourself and how you put others ahead of yourself. Have you got any advice for that, Sam, around where would you start, to support someone on a journey like that?
Yeah, definitely. You touched on the beginning, most important step, which is acknowledging the way that we do feel, acknowledging where are we at with our own self-esteem, how do we value ourselves, how do we view ourselves, how do we talk to ourselves, and where do we place our needs. And that awareness is definitely that first step to being able to make the change. And that can be uncomfortable. It's something that we might be aware of, maybe here, we maybe know that we don't value ourselves that highly, and to be able to look at that and get curious and really sit with it can be painful because we do a lot of things that Sarah mentioned, overcompensating, that's a really common way of coping with these feelings. We tend to either avoid things or overcompensate. They're the two main ways of being able to cope with that. So we acknowledge that that's where we're at. We can then start to really gently, and my biggest advice would be curious, not judgmental, whenever we're looking at ourselves. So with curiosity, just exploring, this is the way that I feel, and then how can I gently start to be more kind to myself So whether that's, what's one kind thing that I can do for my body or my mind, and keep it, what's the next smallest achievable step? We often can set these really big goals or want to make these really big changes to be able to feel more confident, but these small steps will build that belief, because there'll be a resistance. We're often used to not feeling enough in some way. Most people that do come into sessions, whether it's they feel unlovable or they don't feel competent or they don't feel good enough, there's an element of a negative core belief that's within them, and that can change. But once we recognise it, we can then look at, well, why are you good enough? What is all the evidence? You mentioned that, Sarah, you provide so much to us and so much to so many people. But there's a difference between knowing, like us ourselves, knowing that for ourselves and believing it. So really doing the active, conscious work to check in with all these reasons and what would my friends say. Alongside that, when you notice the feeling being that core beliefs may be coming up, check in with your behaviours. If you are overcompensating, okay, I recognise I'm overcompensating. Why am I doing this? And then once we build that awareness, we can look at how we could change it. What's a feasible and achievable way for me to be able to start putting my needs first? Is that scheduling 1 hour on a Friday for me to have that me time and do something just for me? And then if you're not able to do it, check in why. What did get in the way? Why was that uncomfortable? And could you bring other people in to support you? And then I think it's really great you brought in the example of when you're making your kids' food, it's important to get the nutrition in, but when it comes to yourself, a bit of toast will do. Again, recognise this is what I'm doing. I deserve to give myself the same nutrients. I'm important. I'm enough as I am. And being able to really do that work to accept yourself and start trying to, it'll take time, but trying to believe that you are enough as you are. Yes, you can still try to make positive changes, but you're still enough right now. And then we get that feedback from other people that gives us the reassurance that we're actually doing all right.
I think the bit for me that I struggle with is though, because at the moment I'm going through like a personal thing that and all my friends keep saying to me is, I wish you could see what we see. Like, I wish you could see us, like yourself, how everybody else views you, because they're like, you just don't. And it's really hard to watch. Like, I'm emotional talking about it. But it's like, why, even though they're telling me that, I still don't believe it. Yeah. So it's kind of like, how do you hear it? Like, how do you finally let that sink in? That's the bit I'm struggling with.
Yeah, and you're already doing the work, and it's so understandable to feel emotional when we are talking about these things, because it is at the core of us. But you being able to even recognise that that's difficult, you're already putting it into practice. But we live thinking we're not enough for years. And then when we start opening that door to being able to explore, maybe I am, it takes a bit of time to be able to build that belief. And a lot of the time in therapy, people will come and that will examine the belief. So how much do you believe I'm not good enough, from 0 to 100%? And they might say at 90%, I don't believe it. And then in time, we're like, okay, well, where would you like to get to? So you examine that I'm not good enough. This is why I think I'm not good enough. This is why I am good enough. And then flip it instead. So if I was to ask you, how much do you believe, if you feel comfortable, how much do you believe that you're not enough at the moment, from 0 to 100%?
Well, it depends in what capacity.
Yeah.
That for me, like, it's really interesting, because I think in many ways I can see my worth and value. Yeah. But there's just, I think when it comes to as like Sarah, rather than being the, I don't know, the advocate or the obesity expert or the, like, I can probably give you lots of different levels. But if I was down to like me as a core person of like, being a mum or being a partner or being a whatever, it's like, yeah, it can vary. So I don't know. I don't even know what figure I'd give myself on that. It's a hard one to kind of know, but probably quite low.
Yeah, it's a really hard question. It's really hard to put a number on it. And then to anybody that's listening, it's maybe something to do a little bit of reflective work around. How much do you believe I'm not enough? And then ask yourself the opposite. I am good enough. How much do you believe that? And see, even if that's only 10%, what would it look like if I believed that 20%? What would be different? How would my mindset be different? What would I be doing differently? What would other people be doing? And write a list of all the reasons to support the opposite positive. So I am good enough. And when you're writing it, again, there might be that resistance. It might be uncomfortable. It might be that sense of, I know it, but or however, and your brain will automatically try to come up with the reasons against it. But the more we practice it, the more that belief will build. And then through that process, I've seen people being able to get up to that high end of the percentage believing I am good enough. And you're right as well, it is so different depending on the context, us ourselves, out with who we are professionally or in different positions. If we can get that belief to be higher, I think that's where we can see the biggest changes in our self-esteem day to day.
Wow, so powerful to hear you both talk on a really, really deep, subject that gets to the absolute core of who we are and who we believe that we are. And, it's great to have some practical advice on how to start to lean into that more. And it takes a lot of courage, as you say, Sam. And really fascinating. And thank you so much for being so open, Sarah and Sam, for your encouraging words. And, also a very emotional thing. I was tearing up there as well. And I've still got a bit of a lump in my throat listening to that. And I think something that people can either not be aware of or certainly underplay, and you mentioned this earlier, Sam, is the connection between emotion and how we treat our bodies in terms of what food we intake, exercise, rest, all these other things. And I've certainly reading into some of the information that's in the Renu app. I used to never in a million. I'm definitely not an emotional eater. Absolutely not. I'm totally in control of how I feed myself. And then I read the section on emotions and emotional, link to rewarding yourself. And I was like, oh my goodness, I do that every day. When I've had a big long day at the office, I always stop at a well-known hot drinks company, and I get mocha chocolate, all the whipped cream, some shortbread as well for my commute home, and that's my treat for a hard day in the office. But it's me rewarding, and getting that sense of kind of gratification, some sort of dopamine hit or something out of food. And once I realised I was doing that, I found it really easy to stop doing it. And then up until that point, it had been such a habit that was hard to break. And then when I realised why I was doing it, it's like, oh gosh, that's what I'm doing here. And I don't actually need to reward myself with food or a nice drink. So yeah, I'd love to hear a bit more from you, Sam, on that link between emotions and what we eat and what we take into our bodies and how we treat our bodies, and what's the science behind it and how can we learn into that?
Yeah, I think it's always really important for us to be aware that every behaviour has served a purpose at some point. So if we're using food or eating as a way of coping with difficult emotions, or even say sadness or boredom, recognise that has helped us to cope in the past. It's been there for a reason. It may not be serving us anymore. And once we're aware of that, we can look at what an alternative would be. But I think, again, bringing that curiosity into what purpose is it serving? Why am I eating? Is it because it's to cope with an emotion? Or like you described, is it a reward that I'm automatically engaging with? Our brain likes habits. Think of every decision we have to make in a single day. We wake up, and as soon as we wake up, when do we shower? When do we eat? What do we drink? What route do we take? What sort of we got on at work that day? So we can have that decision fatigue. So we go into autopilot. Our habits are in the driving seat. And these habits, again, we've developed these over time. They help our brain to be able to conserve energy. So we can just go through the motions and not actively and real consciously have to make a decision at each of these points. So I get our brain is fantastic, but it likes what's easy, it likes what's familiar. So as you said, once we can recognise, okay, this is a habit that I'm engaging with, the door is then open to be able to look at, okay, I can make a change. Going back to the kind of every behaviour having a purpose, what need is a behaviour meeting? So is it a reward? Does it help reduce stress? Does it help me to deal with negative feelings about myself? What's the specific thing that it's helping you with? And what's an alternative thing that you could put into your life that could help with that?
Yeah, really good advice, Sam. And what I would like to say is I've swapped mocha chocolates for a swim in a jacuzzi. And it's still that me time that you were talking about, and I look forward to it so much. I've not been able to do it for the last few weeks because I've been unwell and can go in the swimming pool, and I'm craving it. It's me time. I love it, and it's also good for me, and it's formed a positive habit. So I think there's a way to shift into something that's, a treat, and it's also good for you. That's, I guess, the best change you could make. And hey, I'm no saint as well, I would say, absolutely. Still a lot more.
I was just going to come in here and say, I think as parents, I think we've got to be careful that we don't start instilling these behaviours in our children, though, because I watch it seeing kind of parents and the way that we reward children for doing something great. So like whether it's potty training when they're younger, whether it's like just getting them to behave and just not do something wrong. It's kind of like, then if we then start giving them chocolate or sweets or something when they're doing something good, we're already getting that connection of association that I do something good, I get rewarded with food. And I'm very mindful of this. So like with Emily, like I absolutely don't do that. And even things like, I think, advent calendars, like we're instilling this behavior that you're getting chocolate as something to get you through December. Well, it's like, my daughter doesn't actually like chocolate. I mean, I don't know how this has happened because I adore chocolate, but she just doesn't, which is great. And I'm going to keep that for as long as possible. But so trying to find an advent calendar that doesn't have chocolate in is quite hard. But I always do it every year because she wants to have an advent calendar, but she doesn't want chocolate. So, she's got a book one this year and also like this one with these little toys in it, which is great. But I do just think our society is geared up for us to reward through food. Like that is the environment that we live in. That is the world that we live in. And that's really hard then when you are then living with obesity and you're trying to just live in this world and you're trying to keep away from this whole like eating unnecessary calories through like rewarding things like that. It's great. Like Bex, you said you've shifted your drink for your sauna and your jacuzzi, etc. And that's great. But you've had to really consciously make that decision shift. Whereas I think, in normal society, it's like, how often do like kids at school be given just sweets for Christmas? Like the teachers will come in with bags of sweets, or it's the same with like Halloween in a way. It's like trick or treating. It's like, we're just rewarding them with food. Like, and I just think it's like really interesting that that's just the way that we're set up. And then we wonder why people struggle so much with their weight and that kind of whole like feeling like they're not getting something if they're not getting a sweet treat. It's like it is so messed up, but it's just so evident that that's just how we've been wired, really, like, and so it's kind of finding ways to undo that or just not instill that, especially having a child, I think.
Yeah, it's a really important conversation to open up, isn't it? Because we've all been conditioned to think that is the go-to, food is the go-to thing for a reward. And like you say, it's for us to actively, and I think having Emily there and having a child really helps us to be able to do that and finding ways to be able to do that for ourselves and recognising that we're not to blame when this conditioning is societal wide, it's our environment that's around us.
That's a great point. Thank you, Sarah. So yeah, we try every podcast to lean into exploring the science behind living with obesity, but also to really try and kill some of the myths, the taboos and the downright lies that are out there. And and you mentioned, Sam, about all the conflicting information that's out there and the quick fixes that aren't actually quick fixes. So this week, given our topic is all about mindset and mood, we thought it'd be good to talk into this I guess commonly held belief that weight loss is all about willpower, and people living with obesity have just not got enough willpower. They've just not got the levels of character strength needed to manage their obesity. What would you say to that? I'll go to you first, Sam, and I love your thoughts on that, Sarah, as well.
Yeah, of course. It's such a harmful narrative that sadly is really present in most of our lives. Definitely can hear people making statements like that, and it creates this and builds on the narrative that's already there, that it's somebody's choice to not be able to make those changes and that they're to blame. But the reality is it's kind of multifaceted. There's lots of different factors that are at play here, biologically, psychology, genetics. There's so many different things that are happening. Whereas when we look at it just being willpower, which comes and goes depending on how we feel in a moment and in a day, but also what we've got going on around us. Willpower isn't a consistent that will stay at the same level. It'll ebb and flow. And to be able to recognise that it's completely normal for willpower to change, and then also have a think about all these different factors. But something that can be helpful is having a think about them, and in a similar way, kind of writing a list so that you can see that of all the different factors that can affect kind of your own weight and being able to make changes, and having a look, as again with percentages, what percentage does this play? Because sometimes we can think this is 100% my fault, that I can't change. I can't change where I'm at right now, but some things we can't change, and having a look at what can we control versus what we can't control. Say genetics isn't something that we can control, but our mindset, like we're talking about today, there's some elements there that we would be able to be more autonomous and make changes with.
Thanks, Sam. And Sarah, what's your view on that statement all about willpower?
This is something I talk about quite a lot, actually, because I think when people do make that comment a lot, they're just like, God, you just need to eat less and move more. And I'm just like, yes, I wish it was that simple. But I think the thing is as well, when we talk about willpower and we look at people living with obesity, it's like, I don't know many people that would stick to 800 calories a day for like months on end in order to try and lose weight. Like that takes a hell of a lot of willpower. But that's what we do. Like I've done that. I know lots of other people that have, when they're on these like, very low calorie diets, etc. When you're fixating on certain food groups that you're only allowed to eat, when you're fixated, it takes huge amounts of willpower to literally go out for dinner with your friends. I've done this and taken my shake with me and sat there and drunk a shake while they're all eating dinner. So I think actually people living with obesity and, or have had weight issues over their lives will probably have the most willpower of people I've ever known in my whole entire life. So I kind of really challenge that back and kind of go, it's really not about willpower in any way, shape or form at all. Because, if it was that simple, we just wouldn't be living like this. We would all choose to not live with obesity. Nobody chooses, and this is what I say this a lot, is nobody chooses to live with obesity. So, if it was as simple as if I just had a bit more willpower, I think, lots of people would just engage that. And so it's really not that simple. And there are so many factors that are out of our control, and and they kind of have such a massive interplay with this. So I just think it's always quite good to use an example of very low calorie diets, because I think, gosh, they take so much willpower.
Yeah, and couldn't agree more. Again, speaking to my own experience, I was on a restrictive calorie diet and movement for 6 months, and it felt endless, and that was only 6 months. But my goodness, it was grueling to keep at it day in, day out. And what I have learned since then is exactly as you've been speaking about, Sam, is if you can, rather than that kind of cold turkey overnight and then you've just got to stick to something really, really difficult over time, is how do you gradually and continually can move towards those better lifestyle choices. It's so much kinder, on yourself to do it that way, and so much more sustainable, I've found as well. And again, definitely not a saint, but it has helped me enormously. And something also that we hear about with weight loss, especially if you've been on it for over kind of a period of time, is this plateau effect that people can start to find if they've been on a weight loss journey for a period of time. Let's explore that as our science for this podcast. People can eventually realise that their weight loss starts to slow down, particularly at that point. And there's a number of places where motivation can drop, but particularly at that point, it can be really hard to stick at it. Any tips for that, Sam?
Yeah, definitely. Again, acknowledging this is something that happens. The science does tell us that plateaus are normal, and when we embark on our journey of change, and specifically in relation to our weight, we can expect it to be kind of linear. However, with any journey, there's ups and downs, there's plateaus, and that's normal. That's not that's not your fault that you're going through maybe a period of maintenance, or maybe putting on a little bit of weight again, and allowing yourself accepting that's part of the process. Yeah, it's difficult that you're not seeing the difference, typically with weight, but using the time to recognise, okay, why else am I doing this? Why else am I wanting to make these healthy changes to how I'm moving or what I'm eating or my habits in general? One may be to reduce my weight, but what are the other reasons? Is it to feel better mentally? Is it to feel more comfortable when I'm with friends? Is it to be able to stop holding myself back from these things that I want to try out, or the opportunities? And really look at that why. Why am I doing this? So that it's not just focused on the weight in particular. And then also recognise you might feel frustrated, you might feel discouraged, you might feel unmotivated. And again, use the time to reflect on your journey so far. What have you achieved? How have you got to this point? What has worked? What would you like? What maybe hasn't worked so well, and how could you change that? What has your body been able to do, and what's your mind been able to do up till this point? And again, that word kindness, compassion, care. How can I care for me even while I'm not seeing the physical changes? And also recognising that internally your body's adjusting, your body's going through that process as well. So giving it the patience to be able to do all the internal work, and then you to be able to still continue to work within who you want to be and get all those other positive benefits alongside the changes that you've seen up till this point.
Thanks, Sam. I guess it'd be interesting to hear as well. We're talking to a little bit about the kind of resilience that's needed when you're on a weight care journey. Have either of you got any advice or guidance on how do you build that resilience? When a tough spot comes along, or maybe you slip a little bit and into bad habits, or you've done something you're not that pleased with yourself around. What are the 2 or 3 things you can do that can kind of really quickly in that moment help you just come out of that?
Well, I mean, I think from my perspective, because obviously I've been on various weight journeys in my life, is that it's trying to kind of take the focus away, like Sam said, away from focusing on weight and weight loss all the time, and actually focusing on health more, and kind of going, okay, like, so this has happened, but ultimately, if I carry on, I'm still improving my health. Like, so by actually still being active and moving more, it might not be seeing the scales drop, but what it is making me do is I'm feeling fitter. I can move a bit better. I'm not as achy. I'm not as this, that, and the other. And kind of, so it's looking at, like, I suppose, like non-scale victories to some extent, and seeing how you can acknowledge those, and like maybe getting into like a smaller clothes size, for instance. And because I've been through phases where I don't feel like the scales are shifting, but when I look in the mirror and people see me, they're kind of like, oh gosh, like, you really look really different all of a sudden. And I do think you can change shape, and you can change, like, even just change your kind of how you feel about you. And so it's about, I suppose, just recognizing what some of those kind of non-weight related things are, and focusing on those, because I think, being able to just walk a little bit further, or not being achy after going for a walk, or these are kind of positive things, rather than just kind of focusing on, oh, the scale's not moving. Well, but your health's improving, and that's really important. And I think if we focus on health, it kind of removes that, like, just fixation on the numbers sometimes. So that's kind of what I try and remind myself about.
Well, and Sam, any advice from you?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's definitely the main one, is being able to look at it more holistically, and reflecting back to the start of your journey. You mentioned being able to walk a little bit further, what things are feeling easier now, and just really being able to celebrate and acknowledge the successes and changes that you've noticed across the board. How are you feeling different in social situations? Is there anything that's feeling easier? Have you done anything that you might not have been able to? Whether that's because of your physical ability or your mental ability. Is there anything you used to avoid that you have done? And just being really able to see the progress that you have made, and build that belief on yourself that even if there has been a slip up, that's okay. That happens. I'm still able to get to where I want to get to, and I'm still doing okay.
I think what you're both talking around here is the power of positive thought, as opposed to allowing the negative to take over. I actually, in my work life, have done quite a bit of work into resilience, both for myself and for colleagues. And I read a great book on it called The Game Plan. It's actually written by a cricketing coach, and I wouldn't normally ever reach for a sporting book to teach me anything, to be honest. But this one was a really good one. And he gave this great analogy about positive thought that's always stuck in my mind. When he talked about his daughter for the first time pouring herself a drink of, I don't know what it was, orange juice or milk or something like that. And so she went to the fridge herself, got the carton out the fridge, took the lid off, poured the drink, and then took the drink from wherever she poured it to sit down to drink it. What's the first instinct we have as a parent in that situation is, be careful, don't drop it. And it's such a common thing that comes out of our mouth. Is what you're actually doing when you're saying that, you're planting a negative image in her head of her dropping it. And her having that visualization in her head of dropping it starts to make her shake and nervous and wobbly, and almost encourages that to happen. Whereas if you were to say, you're doing so well, you're such a big girl, aren't you brilliant? You're talking into the positive of it. And again, I'm no expert here, but our brain is a very visual thing. So if we plant those negative thoughts and images, our brain's wired to visualize that and then make that become reality and manifest. So the big learning for me was that power of positive thought. When you catch yourself talking into negatives to yourself, how do you interrupt it really quickly and flip it to something positive, which I think you've both given some really great examples of there. And I guess speaking into non-scale victories as well, Sarah, I'd love to round off with, as we always do, just talking about some unexpected wins. So I can certainly share one that I've had recently, and I'd love to hear from both of you unexpected wins, either in your work in the obesity space or personal wins. For me, I'm not sure, this might sound a bit weird, but I've actually been unwell 2-3 weeks. I was on antibiotics for an infection, and I went into the docs about it. They always ask you in the docs, you're like, how's your health generally? How are you getting on? And honestly, the first time possibly in my adult life, I'm saying I lead a really healthy life. I go swimming 2-3 times a week. I run 2-3 times a week. I'm careful about what I eat. I'm making sure I'm getting good rest. I've got a busy life, got a lot going on, but I think I'm pretty healthy. And just being able to say that, it just felt so good. And I wasn't expecting it. It wasn't something that I'd really acknowledged in myself, but to actually be to be able to say that. And quite often, so when we're in the doctor's surgery, like, how many units of alcohol did you drink? Like, just 1 or 2. We always kind of round it down, but I felt like I was being really honest as well about it. So that for me was a real win. And I felt you're talking about how we value ourselves. I felt really good in that moment. So what about you guys, Sarah and Sam? Any victories or wins you'd like to share?
I think for me, it just is a bit of a random one, but I've been I bought a juicer probably about 10 years ago, and it's been hidden in the garage somewhere for ages. And in my head, I kept thinking I'd really like to dig my juicer out, because I love having a juice, because I feel like you're getting real goodness into you. So over last weekend, I actually found my juicer, which was very exciting. And I've actually put it in the kitchen now and made myself some juices this week. And it's just, for me, that's been a real positive thing, because I'm like, I just love having them, because I do just feel like you're drinking just goodness, shoving spinach and just all the green stuff in there. So for me, that was a real win, because I've been wanting to do it for literally probably years, and just haven't done it, but just actually now I've got it in the kitchen. I've got no excuse. I can make juices all the time, and it just makes me feel good. And I'm finally putting my nutrition first and doing something positive about it. So, for me, that was a win definitely for this week.
Thanks, Sarah. Well done. Sam, what about you?
Yeah, I think both of those are really great examples of the kind of things that will come up when you see people going through our journey of change, and it highlights how important it is. These things, sometimes when they happen, it can feel good in the moment, and then we can move on. So say with the doctor or being able to bring the juicer out, whereas if we actually sit and think about how good that is that you've been able to put yourself first and put nutrition first for yourself and have the juicer there, or you've been able to be honest with the doctor and feel good in your interaction. And an unexpected win that I see with clients, the majority of the time, is around that non-scale victory. So they might come with a specific goal of losing weight, but then they're able, when they get to the end of their sessions, they're able to leave and accept who they are, and they might not be at a place of being able to wholeheartedly and fully love themselves, but they're definitely on the way and they like themselves and they can see the value, and they're then able to do so many things that they might be holding off to. When I get to X point, then I'll do this. They're finding themselves being able to say, no, I'm going to go and do that now. I'm going to go for that promotion now. I'm going to go on this holiday. I'm going to go for this opportunity. Whereas they thought that they weren't, I guess, worthy enough or able to until they'd reached the end point, whereas now they were able to live their life in a fuller way while still being on their journey, but being kinder to themselves and not holding themselves back. That's probably the one that I see coming up most.
And as a professional, Sam, I'd love to know, what are the wins you get as a professional in this space? What makes your heart really sing?
Yeah, so much. It's such a privilege to be able to just sit and be alongside somebody and watch them come in and be really nervous and not know what they want to talk about, and then for them to find that courage to be able to tune into what they're really feeling and to be able to say that out loud, and watch them grow from feeling, I can't do this, it's not worked in the past, so it's not going to work this time, and then see them consistently being able to build up that belief in themselves. And even the way, as Sarah mentioned, the way that you feel changes how you hold yourself and the way that you interact with others. So people can maybe come in and they'll be really in on themselves, and then in time they'll open up and they're smiling more and they're fuller, and that acceptance is so much more present. And to be alongside somebody when they're doing so much hard work to make these changes, as I say, is a privilege. So yeah, every day's rewarding. I'm very grateful to be a part of people's journey.
Wow, yeah, it must be wonderful to see that. One of the reasons why we shot this, we did this podcast at this point in time, is because it's January, it's New Year's resolution time. Everybody will be full of mince pies and Christmas dinner and all the treats that come along with Christmas. And it's a really common time of year for people to take a bit of a step back and think, right, dry January, or right, I'm going to get fit, I'm going to get healthy, I'm going to lose weight, etc., etc., etc. And a lot of people try it and stick at it maybe for a couple of weeks, maybe for the whole month, and then the motivation wanes. So I guess just the last thing I'd maybe ask for your advice on for our listeners is, if that's where they're finding themselves this January, then what advice have you got for them, Sam, just to really make a lasting change, make a New Year's resolution that's really going to stick, as opposed to one that fades very quickly?
Yeah, definitely. Do it for you. We can have expectations, or we can see people around us setting different goals, and then we can adopt that goal. Whereas if we really think about what we want, who do we want to be, how do we want to live our life, and making a tailored goal that's really important to you, and be realistic. You can have your big goal, and then so that's at the top of the stairs, and then you've got all these steps that would get to that big goal, and start at the bottom. I mentioned it earlier, but what's the smallest achievable next step that you can take? Is that taking 30 minutes before you go into your workplace to do some deep breathing and just to become more present? Is it reaching out to somebody for support just even once a month? Start really, really small, so then your brain builds its belief in your commitment to the process and to the goal, and recognise it's something you want to change in a way that's lasting. It's your health, it's your life, it's do something that's in line with your values, and remember that it does take a bit of patience and commitment. Again, back to that, you're worth it, you deserve it. So yeah, be real. If you recognise your expectations or the goal feels really big, just breaking that down into small steps so that you can celebrate each step up as you go.
Thank you. Well, I think that's a great note to leave things on. Honestly, feeling a little bit emotional after this podcast. It's been one of the most powerful hours I think I've ever spent, and I'm so grateful to you both for opening up and for all the words of wisdom and support done in such a compassionate and caring way, Sam. So yeah, I wish you both a wonderful 2024 ahead of you, and to all of our listeners, I hope this year brings you everything that you're looking for, and that we've helped you to just set it off in the right direction. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.